Have you ever just looked up at the night sky, all those stars, and felt this pull? Like there's something huge, way bigger than us that we just don't fully grasp?
The sense of mystery, yeah.
Yeah.
It's ancient.
Well, for over 40 years, Dolores Cannon, she was an American hypnotherapist. She actually spent her career mapping those unseen territories.
Right. And it's fascinating how she started.
You'll definitely want to stick with us through this whole deep dive, because where she went, the things she uncovered, honestly, it might just change how you see everything. It gets pretty surprising.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't initially looking for, cosmic secrets. Her work started very practically.
Exactly. Back in the 60s, she was using hypnosis mostly for trauma therapy, helping people process things. Standard stuff, really.
But then something shifted.
Completely shifted. A client, seemingly out of nowhere, starts describing these incredibly vivid, past life memories. It was like they were tapping into some kind of huge universal library of knowledge.
Whoa, okay.
So Dolores, being naturally curious, she thought, okay, let's follow this. She started using regression hypnosis more deliberately to explore these accounts.
And what came out?
Just astonishing stories. Hints about human origins being way different, lost civilizations, the power of consciousness itself. Things we're usually not taught.
That throws up some big questions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About memory, consciousness.
Yeah.
What are we actually capable of accessing?
Totally. Were they real past lives, collective unconscious, something else? Her willingness to just dive in, that's what's remarkable.
Especially given the time period.
Right. So picture it, early 1970s. Dolores has this logical, almost scientific background, and she's in a session with a client named Betty.
Okay.
Suddenly, Betty starts talking in this completely different voice. Describes being a farmer, medieval village, super detailed.
Okay, so initial reaction might be maybe a deeply buried memory or a very vivid fantasy.
That's what Dolores thought, exactly. But then Betty keeps going. Describes a life before that one, on another planet called Atlantis. And she says she came here to Earth specifically to, essentially to plant the seeds of life.
Wow. Okay, so that's basically panspermia, right? The idea life spreads through the universe.
Kind of, yeah. But this was directed panspermia from a first-person account under hypnosis, claiming they brought life here.
That's a huge claim.
Huge. Imagine being Dolores. Your scientific mind is screaming, no way, but you're hearing these incredibly specific details, advanced farming techniques they supposedly used, teaching primitive humans how to plant.
The level of detail must have been compelling.
Utterly compelling. So that conflict, science versus this narrative, her curiosity won out. She decided, okay, I need to see if this happens with other clients. Is this a one-off or is there a pattern?
Which is a good scientific practice, right? Looking for replication for consistency.
Definitely. And what she found, it must have been a mix of pure excitement and honestly, probably terror.
How so?
The excitement of maybe stumbling onto something monumental,
Yeah.
But also the fear of, losing all credibility. Venturing into territory that mainstream science would just dismiss as, nonsense.
Yeah, the professional risk would have been enormous.
Then came Michael. Young guy came to her for anxiety help. Under hypnosis, totally different story emerges.
Different from Betty's.
Yeah. He described being an emissary from a planet called Sirius, and his mission, spiritual, to help humans evolve, find harmony with the universe.
Yeah, okay, so not seeding life, but guiding it.
Seems like it. He talked about these bright ships over ancient Earth, beings that looked kind of human but had these incredibly wise eyes, teaching early humans about stars, cosmic cycles.
That's fascinating, because now you have two different accounts, Betty and Michael, both involving extraterrestrials, but with, different motivations.
Exactly. One seems more biological, seeding life. The other is more spiritual, guidance, evolution. It adds layers.
Suggesting maybe Earth's early history wasn't just one single interaction, but maybe multiple groups with different agendas?
That's what it started to look like. Dolores felt like she was piecing together this giant, unknown puzzle. Themes kept repeating across different clients. Bees from other worlds, yes, but with varied purposes. Some scientific, some altruistic.
Any hint of negativity?
Oh, yeah. There were hints of conflict, too, between different groups. Maybe Atlantis was more focused on, material stuff, technological achievements, while Sirius was about elevating consciousness, opposing intentions.
So not all kumbaya among the visitors.
Doesn't sound like it. You can imagine the emotional roller coaster for Dolores. The absolute thrill, am I rewriting human history? But then the crushing weight of doubt, the fear of ridicule, sleepless nights probably.
The burden of carrying information that, if true, changes everything. It's immense, especially when it clashes so hard with accepted history and science.
Absolutely. Her dedication to just keep going, keep documenting, it's really something.
So how does she try to make sense of it? What was her method?
Rigorous. Very rigorous, actually. She recorded every single session, transcribed them word for word, compared accounts meticulously, looking for those patterns, those consistencies.
Okay.
Then, 1972, another key moment. A client named Sarah just seemed like an ordinary housewife.
And under hypnosis.
She describes being from Atlantis too, but her story was darker. She talked about being part of a group from Atlantis that tried and failed to basically dominate early Earth.
Dominate. Wow. Failed. Why?
Apparently, humans were more resilient than they expected, and Sarah mentioned the knowledge they had shared being misused, by both sides perhaps.
That adds a whole other layer. Human agency, the consequences of shared knowledge. It's not just about the visitors, it's about our reaction too. A cautionary element.
Right. It totally shifted Dolores's understanding. It wasn't just, wow, aliens exist. It was potentially this complex ancient history of cosmic interactions, conflicts, mistakes made, maybe lessons learned. Or not learned.
A cosmic drama playing out on Earth.
Kind of. And as the 70s went on, the sheer number of clients telling similar, detailed stories, it just wore down her initial skepticism. Each person became like a little window onto this massive, unexplored cosmic history.
And this led to her books.
Eventually, yeah. Her notes, her transcripts, they formed the basis for books like Keepers of the Garden, which really dives into that whole extraterrestrial seeding idea.
So it forces you to ask.
What if everything we think we know about our history is just the surface? Just a tiny fraction of a much bigger, much more complex story.
That possibility alone.
Yeah.
It's paradigm shifting.
Yeah.
Thinking our origins might have this whole cosmic context.
And that really paved the way for the next phase of her work, which got even stranger, if you can believe it. Lost civilizations, Atlantis, Lemuria.
Ah, the classic mysteries.
Exactly. But her clients weren't just repeating myths, they were describing them as real places. Imagine finding out humanity once had this golden age, with technologies that would make our modern science look, well, primitive.
Legends of Atlantis and Lemuria have been around forever, of course, always debated. Dolores's work offers this unique hypnosis-based perspective on them.
Yeah, and in the 1980s, her sessions started consistently bringing up these places. But the descriptions, they weren't just cities, they were civilizations that could apparently manipulate energy with their minds.
With their minds?
Yeah. Build temples using levitation, store information not in books, but somehow in the fabric of the universe itself.
Oh.
All supposedly through thought, intention, maybe amplified by things like crystals.
Okay, that sounds incredibly advanced, almost like science fiction, but emerging from these hypnosis sessions.
Right, and you can see Dolores wrestling with it. The sheer wonder, could this be real versus the huge responsibility? If it is real, how do you even begin to tell people? The world might not be ready.
Yet she kept her methodology.
Absolutely. Meticulous recording, precise questions, detailed notes. She was always trying to separate potential fact from fantasy, even with material out there.
That commitment to documentation is key, regardless of whether one accepts the accounts literally. It provides the data.
Then, 1983, a really pivotal session. Client named Laura.
What did Laura describe?
Life as a priestess in Atlantis. But she emphasized this incredible harmony they had between their advanced technology and their spirituality. It wasn't one or the other, it was integrated.
That's a powerful concept.
Yeah.
True advancement involving both the inner and the outer.
Totally. And Laura gave specifics. Using crystals, not just as decoration, but to focus mental energy. And building temples by, get this, levitating huge stones purely through collective focused intention.
Levitation through intention, wow.
Dolores apparently just thought, if this is imagination, how does she know so much detail? It just pushed her further.
Did other clients mention similar things?
That's the thing. Yes, the accounts started converging. There was Robert, an engineer in his current life. Under hypnosis, he's describing operating these crystal energy beacons.
Beacons for what?
Transportation portals between Atlantean cities. And then Anna, a teacher, she talked about how they stored knowledge not on drives, but in the basic energy of the universe, accessible through psychic abilities.
The convergence of specific, unusual details across different people that's often highlighted as a key, intriguing aspect of her work, even if it's not proof in a lab setting.
Right. It makes you pause. But imagine Dolores living with this. The fascination must have been immense, uncovering this potential lost world. But also the anguish, why was this lost? How could humanity have had this and then not?
And the personal cost you mentioned earlier.
It was growing. More scrutiny from critics as her work got known. Her husband, Johnny, understandably worried about her, about the controversy. She must have felt incredibly isolated at times, like a lone voice saying these unbelievable things.
Being a pioneer in challenging fields is never easy. It takes real inner strength to face that kind of skepticism.
To cope, she really doubled down on finding connections. Comparing client accounts, yes, but also looking at ancient myths, archaeology. Finding Plato's detailed descriptions of Atlantis, for example, must have felt like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not completely crazy. There are echoes.
Connecting to established myths or texts can provide a kind of anchor, even if interpretations differ wildly.
Then, mid-80s, Lemuria starts showing up more prominently through a client named David, an artist.
And Lemuria was different from Atlantis in these accounts.
Very different, yeah. David described Lemuria as deeply connected to nature, almost symbiotic, and they used sound and vibration for creation. He even talked about building huge statues, maybe like Easter Island, using these sonic techniques.
Interesting contrast. Atlantis more mind-focused, technology-driven perhaps, while Lemuria was more about natural harmony, vibrational energy.
That's the picture that emerged. Atlantis, mind power, crystals. Lemuria, earth harmony, sound, vibration. You can feel Dolores' excitement. Maybe I can reconstruct this lost history. But also the fear. Her books, like The Convoluted Universe, were coming out, and she knew they'd face ridicule.
Sharing alternative histories always invites that risk. It takes courage.
And these sessions didn't just describe the civilizations, they started hinting at why they fell. For Atlantis, the theme was knowledge becoming restricted, controlled by an elite, leading to power imbalances.
That's a classic pitfall.
And the misuse of their crystal technology because of that power imbalance.
Power corrupts, even with advanced crystal tech, apparently. It's a timeless lesson.
Then, 1987, a really impactful session. A client described the actual fall of Atlantis, not gradually, but catastrophically. Huge explosions, cities sinking, all because they misused their energy sources.
A dramatic, cautionary end, highlighting the risks of advancement without wisdom.
But even then, there was this little spark of hope. Another client suggested the knowledge wasn't totally destroyed, just hidden, waiting to resurface when we're ready for it.
This idea of cycles, knowledge lost, maybe be found again when consciousness evolves.
So by the late 80s, Dolores saw her work as more than just hypnosis. She was mapping this incredible, forgotten past. And it led straight to questions about us now. What can we learn? Can we get that knowledge back? And think about it. What would you do differently if you knew for sure that humans once wielded forces that seem impossible today?
It forces a deep reflection on our own path, doesn't it? Are we making similar mistakes? Are we missing something profound that was once understood?
Which brings us to maybe the toughest part of her findings, the darker side. Why did these amazing civilizations collapse? I mean, how would it feel to realize humanity had it all, cosmic understanding, harmony, power, and just threw it away? Greed, fear, power struggle.
Understanding the why behind potential collapses, even from sources like these, could offer really valuable lessons about what threatens any society, including our own.
That's exactly where Dolores' focus went in the late 80s. It wasn't just what happened, but why did it happen? Again, her methodical side kicked in, trying to understand the root causes.
Moving from description to causality. That's crucial for extracting meaning.
She had this really key session in 1989 with a client named Margaret.
And Margaret's role.
She described being a counselor in Atlantis, and she painted this picture of knowledge being hoarded by an elite priesthood, which naturally bred envy, resentment, and eventually the use of their advanced technology not for good, but for control. Domination.
The concentration of power again. A recurring warning sign in history and these accounts.
Margaret even gave examples. Leaders manipulating solar energy, basically weaponizing it to intimidate people. It hammered home for Dolores. The collapse wasn't some asteroid or natural disaster. It was us, human flaws, amplified by immense power.
Shifting the blame from external forces to internal failings. That's a much harder, but maybe more useful lesson. It resonates with historical analysis too.
And other accounts seem to back this up. Thomas, a mechanic now, described conflicts back in Lemuria. Over what? Monopolizing their sound technology. A creative force that could also be incredibly destructive.
Misuse of powerful tools seems to be a theme across both civilizations.
Yeah. And then Susan, a librarian, talked about controversial genetic experiments in Atlantis. Attempts at biological mixing that, she said, ultimately weakened their society.
The consistency in these specific types of misuse, power hoarding, weaponizing tech, genetic issues across different clients adds that intriguing layer of coherence again.
Dolores must have been just reeling. Connecting these dots, seeing how these stories might explain gaps in our own history, but also feeling this despair. Like, are we just doomed to repeat these mistakes?
It's a heavy burden, grappling with information that suggests such a potentially tragic pattern in human behavior, especially when it challenges your core beliefs about progress.
And the outside world wasn't making it easier. More books meant more attention, but also more criticism. Colleagues probably thought she'd gone off the deep end. Her husband Johnny's worry grew.
Pursuing work like this requires incredible resilience against both professional skepticism and personal concerns.
She tried to find anchors, comparing these client accounts to ancient myths, great floods, gods departing Earth, looking for those faint echoes in our collective stories.
It's a way to frame it to see if there are parallel narratives, even if they're mythological rather than historical in the conventional sense.
Then, 1990, another crucial session. James, a bookkeeper.
What did James reveal?
He brought back the beings from Sirius, the benevolent ones Michael mentioned earlier. James's account suggested they made a conscious decision to withdraw.
Withdraw why?
Because they saw humanity heading towards self-destruction. Fear, greed. We weren't ready for the knowledge and power we had access to, partly thanks to them, so they pulled back. And apparently even removed or disabled some of the most dangerous technologies to prevent us from doing even more damage.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cosmic intervention as a kind of tough love, a consequence management strategy.
That's how Dolores seemed to interpret it. A hard lesson on a cosmic scale. Freedom of choice, yes, but choices have consequences. And this revelation really lit a fire under her. It wasn't just history anymore. It was a warning. Her purpose became sharing this urgently.
So she shifted from being a chronicler of the past to potentially a messenger for the future.
Pretty much. She saw these repeating cycles in session after session, progress, then regression. And it led her to that huge question, is this pattern inevitable? Are we fated to keep messing up?
The ultimate question about free will versus destiny, perhaps, played out on a civilizational scale.
But amidst all that, there was still that thread of hope. A later session suggested the lost knowledge isn't gone forever. It's still there somehow, in the universal ether, waiting for us to grow up enough to handle it responsibly. So think about that. If you knew humanity lost its way through bad choices, but still had a chance to reclaim that potential, what would you focus on? What would you do?
It puts the responsibility squarely back on us, doesn't it? It's a message of hope, but also of profound agency. Our future isn't necessarily fixed.
Which leads perfectly into the final and maybe the most mind-bending phase of her work, exploring higher dimensions, the power of consciousness itself. I mean, what if this reality we see? What if it's just a tiny sliver? A curtain hiding whole other universes all around us.
This is where her work really expanded, moving beyond history, even cosmic history, into the fundamental nature of reality.
Totally. Through the 2000s, her focus shifted. The sessions started going beyond ETs and Atlantis, diving deep into reality itself. Ideas like consciousness actually shaping the universe, higher dimensions not being out there, but right here, coexisting, accessible through awareness.
And she maintained her approach.
That same blend, yeah. Still asking detailed questions, recording everything, but with this incredible open-mindedness to concepts that were just way out there.
Exploring that edge where subjective experience meets theoretical physics almost. It's a hallmark of her later work.
In 2001, a session with Emily just blew the doors off. Emily described existing in a dimension where time isn't linear. It just isn't. Past, present, future, all simultaneous.
Non-linear time, okay.
And Emily explained that elevated emotions, love, joy, gratitude were like the key. They could allow access to this timeless state. She even talked about parallel universes branching off with every single choice we make.
These are concepts you hear in theoretical physics, quantum mechanics, emerging here through hypnosis. Fascinating, if incredibly hard to verify.
Dolores must have been just trying to wrap her head around it, but these themes kept popping up. Daniel, a musician, described communication in these realms not with words, but telepathic images. Instant, vibrant understanding.
Direct knowing.
Yeah. And Clara, a nurse, talked about experiencing existence there as just pure light, pure consciousness.
The consistency in using similar metaphors, light, vibration, nonlinear time, across different people trying to describe these states is definitely interesting.
For Dolores, these must have felt like breakthrough moments. The idea that our minds, our consciousness, might be the key to literally everything. That we have this potential to transcend limitations we didn't even know we had.
But the challenge remains.
Oh, huge challenges. How do you even talk about this stuff? How do you translate these incredibly abstract, subjective experiences into language? And of course, the skepticism from the scientific community only grew.
Translating the transcendental into verifiable data points, that's the perennial difficulty in consciousness research.
But she kept pushing, finding connections, parallels in ancient philosophies, Eastern mysticism, for example, and connections to quantum physics, which was starting to talk about observer effects, consciousness influencing reality.
Right, finding resonance in other fields, even if they're also on the fringes or highly theoretical.
Then, 2003, Stephen, a teacher, his session brought it back to something more tangible, thought as a creative force. He described how in Atlantis, they supposedly used focused intention consciously to manifest things.
Linking the power of thought back to those lost civilizations. It's a central idea in many metaphysical traditions too. Thought creates reality.
Exactly. Manifesting harmony through belief. But then, the flip side. A session with Rachel emphasized the responsibility. Our beliefs don't just create, they can also imprison us. Limiting beliefs, creating limited realities.
And karma.
Rachel described karma not as cosmic punishment, but more like an energetic echo. What you put out energetically through thoughts and actions comes back. Simple physics, almost.
Cause and effect on an energetic level. It adds that crucial ethical layer to the power of consciousness.
Rachel also talked about those higher states again, pure energy beings, free from the birth-death cycle. And attainable how? By raising your vibrational frequency, consciously choosing higher thoughts, higher emotions.
Raising your vibration, another common theme in spiritual teachings. Shifting your energy to access different states of being.
Then, 2005, a real bombshell moment. A client suggests human DNA itself is changing, evolving, to literally absorb more light.
More light.
Like higher frequency energy, preparing us collectively for a spiritual evolution. A jump in consciousness that the client suggested echoed the state Atlantis supposedly reached before its fall.
So a biological underpinning for spiritual evolution, that's a provocative idea, offering a hopeful trajectory for humanity.
Dolores must have felt vindicated almost. Like, yes, this confirms the bigger purpose I've been sensing. Her later sessions really felt as they were charting a map for the future. Consciousness is the territory, thought is the tool.
But the big question remains.
How do we teach people to use this power wisely? How do we avoid the pitfalls Atlantis and Lemuria supposedly fell into? And for you, listening, if you knew your thoughts could literally build universes or trap you in a cage, what would you choose to think? What reality would you start building?
It's an incredibly empowering but also sobering question. It places immense responsibility on each individual's awareness.
Which brings us right to the final chapter of Dolores' life and work. Her mission became focused on sharing this knowledge, empowering humanity with the awareness of our own staggering potential. I mean, what if you found out you have the power to change things, really change things, and someone spent their life trying to show you how?
Her transition from primarily a researcher and therapist to more of a messenger, a teacher. It reflects that deep conviction she developed about the importance of these findings.
Absolutely. In her last decade or so, the 2000s into the 2010s, all her energy went into getting this message out. We have incredible power through our thoughts, our intentions. They shape our reality.
But the challenge still.
It's huge. How do you convince a world largely grounded in materialism that something as intangible as thought can have real, tangible effects? It requires a massive shift in perspective.
Breaking through deeply ingrained beliefs is never easy, especially on a collective level.
In 2008, she had this really touching session with Sophia. Sophia described herself as a volunteer.
A volunteer?
Yeah, like a soul from another place, another dimension maybe, who chose to incarnate on Earth specifically to help, to raise the planet's vibration, remind people of their true divine nature. And Sophia really stressed the power of positive thoughts, simple acts of love as the way to do it.
That concept of starseeds, or volunteers, resonates with a lot of people who feel that kind of purpose, that connection to something beyond Earth.
Dolores was apparently deeply moved. It felt like confirmation. Like all the pieces, ETs, past lives, lost civilizations, consciousness, it all pointed to this one fundamental truth. We are the creators of our experience. We have that power.
And this theme kept repeating.
Consistently. Lucas, a student, talked about how our collective intentions generate actual vibrations that influence world events. Maria, a therapist, describes spiritual evolution as becoming light bodies, a state she said we had in Atlantis and could reach again.
Reinforcing that message of agency, potential, and transformation, both personal and collective.
Dolores took this message everywhere. Lectures, workshops all over the world. Her books reached so many people. You can find countless stories online of how her work just clicked for them, changed their lives.
Even while facing criticism.
Oh yeah, the criticism never really stopped, and doing all that travel and work in her 70s took a toll physically. But she was relentless, driven by this conviction.
That level of dedication, especially later in life, facing skepticism, it speaks volumes about her belief in the message.
She kept looking for validation too, found parallels in ancient texts like the Vedas, saw connections in new scientific ideas about consciousness. In 2010, a client, Ethan, an engineer, talked about a language of forms, communication in higher dimensions beyond words, something humanity was apparently becoming more capable of accessing intuitively.
The idea of bridging ancient wisdom and modern understanding seemed important to her, finding common ground.
And Olivia, another client, brought up breaking the karmic cycle, not through endless suffering, but through belief. Through consciously choosing positive expectations, you could shift your energetic trajectory. Dolores really emphasized that in her later work, we are co-creators, full stop.
Empowering people with that understanding that they're not just subject to fate, but active participants. That seems like the core of her final message.
Then in 2014, just shortly before she passed away, there was this incredibly poignant moment. A client shared a vision of the future.
What kind of vision?
A future where humanity had reached a state of unity, of light, and the client directly credited Dolores' work, her lifetime of bringing this information through, as being one of the key things helping to make that future possible.
Wow, that must have been incredibly moving for her. A sense that her life's work had a real tangible purpose in that bigger picture.
You have to imagine, she was deeply touched. She passed away later that year, October 2014. But she left behind this enormous legacy, books, recordings, thousands of sessions, and her work just continues to resonate. People still feel that connection.
Her decades of exploring the frontiers of consciousness have undeniably left a significant mark, challenging assumptions, opening possibilities, prompting countless people to look at themselves and the universe in a new way.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, wow. We've journeyed through these incredible accounts Dolores Cannon uncovered, our potential cosmic origins, those stunning lost civilizations, and maybe most importantly, the sheer power locked within our own consciousness. The scope is just surprising, isn't it?
It really is. Her dedication resulted in this unique, sprawling narrative about humanity's past, present, and potential future. A truly compelling perspective.
Now, if this journey sparked something in you, if you found it thought-provoking, we'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And maybe drop a comment below what resonated most with you.
Yeah, doing that actually helps YouTube figure out what kind of content you enjoy, so it can recommend more deep dives like this, things exploring these kinds of ideas.
Exactly. It helps us all find more cool stuff. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And maybe share this deep dive with a friend or anyone you think might find this exploration of consciousness and hidden history fascinating.
Sharing these perspectives helps broaden the conversation, which is always valuable when dealing with such big, intriguing topics.
So please remember, like, comment, subscribe, and share. It makes a difference.
Thanks so much for joining us as we explored the incredible work of Dolores Cannon.
And right now, you should see 2 more videos popping up on your screen. Click on one of them that catches your eye and continue your own journey of discovery.